Hidden deep in the bayou is a forgotten town. It was there, in the spring of 2000, that tragedy struck. When a violent killer began terrorizing the quiet bayous of Louisiana, he reportedly warned that many people would lose their lives that night before walking away. The Bureau immediately mobilized its agents. Investigators questioned themselves, wondering where they might have overlooked crucial clues. When the suspect appeared armed, one of the agents shouted that a gun had been spotted and that an armed pursuit was underway. On the evening of April 10, 14-year-old Brittany Dukes was in her bedroom, listening to her mother, Angela Casten, and stepfather, Jesse James, arguing in the next room. The teenager later recalled how she could hear yelling, screaming, and sounds of hitting echoing through the house. Fearful of what might happen, she locked her bedroom door. A few minutes later, Brittany overheard her mother speaking frantically on the phone with emergency dispatchers. Angela told them that her husband was holding a gun to her head and threatening to shoot before help could arrive. Before Brittany could react, she heard a single, deafening gunshot. Investigators later learned that Jesse James had placed a shotgun under Angela's cheek and pulled the trigger. The sound of the blast was even captured by the 911 dispatcher who was still on the line. Paralyzed by fear, Brittany listened as her stepfather's footsteps approached her room. He began pounding on the door, demanding that she open it. Before she could respond, he forced the door open. When she looked up, he was standing there, gripping the shotgun tightly and staring directly at her. She later remembered begging him not to, pleading with Jesse to stop. He responded by questioning what she meant, and then told her that her mother was already dead. After a moment, he ordered her not to stand there and told her to call 911. Brittany immediately ran past Jesse toward the phone. Under his watchful gaze, she fumbled for a dial tone while he stood a short distance away, preparing ammunition and handling his weapons. He told her that many people were going to die that night, and then he walked out. Realizing more clearly that her mother had been on the phone when she was shot, Brittany rushed back to her mother's side and attempted to summon help again. She later recalled gripping her mother's hand and talking to her, but she had a grim sense that an ambulance would not change the outcome. Local police arrived almost immediately, but who had a lengthy criminal record in Lake Providence was already gone. He left with a list of people he intended to pursue. Less than a mile down the road, Casten entered the home of Sharon McIntyre, where his other stepdaughter, Brandy, was staying overnight. Casten slipped into Sharon's dark bedroom where Sharon and her boyfriend were asleep. He turned on the lights and fired into Sharon's back several times. Startled by the gunfire, Brandy said she leaped from the bed and crawled under it without remembering the moment her feet hit the floor. She heard Sharon's boyfriend screaming her name and realized someone had been shot. Brandy also heard a man issuing commands to Sharon's boyfriend and recognized her stepfather's voice telling him to lie down and warning that he would shoot him if he tried to get up. She then heard Casten demand to know where the other girl was, while her boyfriend insisted he did not know. Moments later, her bedroom door burst open and the light came on. She remembered panicking because her radio was still playing, and she feared it would reveal her hiding spot. Convinced that anyone searching would check under the bed first, she covered her mouth to stay silent and watched his shoes carefully, praying he wouldn't come closer. Terrified, she saw Jesse glance into the closet before leaving the room as suddenly as he had entered. She remained frozen in fear, certain that he would return. When she finally tried to call 911, the phone line was dead. Moments later, her aunt appeared at the front door, delivering the devastating news that Jesse had killed her mother. Overcome with shock, Brandy collapsed to the floor. The next thing she remembered was sitting in a car beside Brittany, who was holding her tightly as police officers shouted for everyone to leave the area. The girls were then taken to the police station for safety. Law enforcement quickly issued an all-points bulletin for Jesse James Casten, now wanted for the murders of his wife and her best friend. Authorities had no idea what was driving his violent rampage or who might be his next target. Within minutes, less than a mile from Sharon McIntyre's home, 2 Lake Providence police officers spotted a suspicious pickup truck parked near an elementary school. As they pulled up beside it, Casten ambushed them. Both officers were shot. Those who knew Jesse described him as a skilled marksman, an expert with any type of firearm, whether a rifle, handgun, or shotgun. Although one officer suffered a serious wound to the neck, both managed to radio for help and identify Casten as the shooter. Officers inside the police department later recalled hearing the gunfire echoing over the radio as frantic voices reported the attack in real time. Before reinforcements could reach the scene, Casten fled on foot. Being a lifelong resident of Lake Providence, he knew every inch of the area. Witnesses said he sprinted across the school's baseball field toward a nearby residential boat dock. Physically fit and highly experienced in outdoor survival and hunting, Casten used his knowledge of the terrain to his advantage. He stole a boat and disappeared into the dark waters of Lake Providence. Sometime later, he broke into a vehicle, stole a cell phone, and made several calls. In one of them, he warned his cousin to tell certain people that no one would be safe as long as he remained alive and free. The small town of Lake Providence was about to face even more bloodshed. Special Agent Nate Song, a veteran investigator specializing in violent crimes, recognized the urgency of the situation. He and his team understood that the killing spree would not end until Casten was stopped. The suspect had already murdered 2 people, shot at police officers, and was known to have a hit list. Every passing second increased the danger. By mid-April 2000, authorities in Lake Providence, Louisiana, were in the midst of a full-scale manhunt for the cold-blooded killer who shared his name with one of the Wild West's most notorious outlaws. No one in town would ever forget that name, Jesse James Casten. Casten was wanted for the murders of his wife, Angela, and her close friend, Sharon McIntyre, as well as for the attempted murders of 2 Lake Providence police officers. Realizing the situation had escalated beyond local control, the police department requested assistance from the Louisiana State Police. Meanwhile, Casten had already slipped away into the rural outskirts of town. He moved carefully through ditches, tree lines, and wooded areas, searching for a place to hide. Eventually, he came across the property of a man named Ernie Wilson. Behind Wilson's home stood an old, abandoned camper overgrown with weeds, which Casten used as a temporary shelter. Less than 5 miles outside Lake Providence, he remained hidden, observing the Wilson house from a distance. When the homeowners were away, he crept onto the property to steal food and supplies. 3 days after his escape began, Casten took a bolder step. He broke into the Wilsons' home. Witnesses later said Casten ordered Ernie Wilson not to move, then bound him to a chair and stole $170 before forcing the elderly man into his own truck at gunpoint. He compelled Wilson to drive toward Texas, and they eventually fueled up before the truck's motor failed near Marshall, Texas, on Interstate 20. At that point, Casten fled on foot and left Wilson by the roadside. A passing motorist stopped to help Wilson, who was returned to Lake Providence physically unharmed. Although Casten had put distance between himself and Louisiana law enforcement, he had made a grave miscalculation. By kidnapping Wilson and crossing state lines, he had committed federal offenses. Federal authorities were notified immediately. Special Agent Harry Deal, a native of Lake Providence who had grown up near Casten, was assigned to the manhunt. Because the crime involved interstate movement of a kidnapping victim, the case fell under federal jurisdiction, enabling the FBI to assume control of the investigation. The Bureau quickly issued an unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, UFAP warrant, a federal tool that permits authorities to assist in capturing fugitives who flee state justice. A tip later placed Casten at a Longview, Texas, truck stop, and agents raced to the location, only to find that he had already vanished. Investigators feared he might be several states away or even heading toward the Mexican border, so checkpoints and border crossings were alerted and resources were mobilized to prepare for the worst. Agents on the case described Casten as a dangerous individual who should never be confronted without overwhelming tactical advantage. Anyone who encountered him at close range risked being overpowered. By this time, news of Jesse James Casten's brutal crimes had spread rapidly throughout the small community of Lake Providence. Fear gripped the entire town. Many residents believed that Casten would return, and no one felt that terror more deeply than his stepdaughter, Brandy, who had narrowly survived his attack by hiding beneath her bed. She later admitted that she was certain he would come back for her, and possibly for others he held grudges against. The atmosphere in town was thick with dread. Many people were too frightened to assist law enforcement, and their fear was not unfounded. Jesse, along with his brothers Frank and Sonny, had been known as dangerous men since childhood. Their father had named each of them after members of the infamous Jesse James gang, and locals often said the brothers seemed destined for trouble from the start. Accounts from neighbors and acquaintances painted a grim picture of their upbringing. The Casten boys were reportedly raised under harsh and neglectful conditions. According to those familiar with the family, the children were often locked out of their home 5 or 6 nights a week. Some nights they found shelter with neighbors. Other times they slept beside their family dog or even in a nearby cemetery or laundromat. One local recalled that there was a laundromat not far from the neighborhood where the heat from the dryers vented outside. On cold nights, the boys would lie near the exhaust vents for warmth after being thrown out of their house. Their father, Toki Casten, a commercial fisherman, was also known to abandon his children for long stretches on a desolate strip of land called Stack Island, located in the middle of the Mississippi River. People who remembered those days said the boys often endured freezing temperatures with little more than thin shirts to protect them, surviving conditions that would have broken most grown men. From those harsh experiences, Jesse learned how to survive in the wild and developed an almost unnatural comfort around dangerous animals. He was known for handling snapping turtles, alligators, and other creatures that most people would avoid, showing no sign of fear or hesitation. Former prosecutor Buddy Caldwell, who had encountered Casten in earlier years, was well aware of this fearlessness. He recalled that Jesse had once been accused of illegally fishing on private property after cutting locks off gates along the river. However, Casten's behavior only escalated from there. His run-ins with the law became increasingly violent. In 1988, an altercation outside a local restaurant ended in bloodshed when Casten shot and killed a man while another individual held the victim. It was a turning point, his first known killing. Whether or not Jesse James Casten had a legitimate reason for his first killing remained uncertain. He claimed that he had acted in self-defense, but the court rejected that argument and found him guilty of manslaughter. During sentencing, however, he made a daring escape from the East Carroll Parish Courthouse. For days, authorities were unable to locate him. Casten managed to evade capture for nearly 2 months. During that time, he demonstrated remarkable survival skills. According to reports, he often buried himself beneath layers of mud to mask his scent from police dogs, which would pass directly over him without detection. Eventually, he turned himself in and joined his brothers, Frank and Sonny, who were already in jail on minor charges. Not long after, the 3 brothers became involved in another violent episode when Frank and Sonny killed a sheriff's deputy during a failed jailbreak. Jesse went on to serve an 8-year prison sentence before being released in 1996. Now, only a few years later, Jesse was once again on the run. His ability to survive in the wilderness deeply concerned Special Agent Nate Song of the FBI. The agent later explained that searching for Casten in the dense woods would have been extremely dangerous, since Casten's survival skills and familiarity with the terrain gave him a clear advantage. Sending just 1 or 2 officers into that environment, he said, could easily have ended in tragedy. What made the situation even more alarming was Casten's unpredictability. He had murdered his wife and her best friend, yet had chosen to spare one child while attempting to kill another. He had kidnapped an elderly man and released him unharmed, but had also shot at 2 police officers with clear intent to kill. Authorities described him as a highly dangerous man who was selective about whom he chose to harm, a pattern that left residents in constant fear. Many people in the community began to wonder if they had ever done anything that might make them one of his future targets. By the spring of 2000, 34-year-old Jesse James Casten had horrified the small Louisiana town of Lake Providence through a series of brutal acts, murdering his wife and her friend, attacking police officers, and kidnapping a neighbor. As the FBI worked to determine what had driven him to such violence, investigators interviewed his co-workers at a Mississippi power plant, where a startling detail emerged. They discovered that Casten had been having an affair with a local woman, a secret he had kept hidden from his wife, Angela. They discovered that, in the days before the killings, Angela Casten had learned about her husband's affair. Investigators reported that Angela and her friend Sharon McIntyre had traveled to the Mississippi job site where Jesse worked, intending to catch him with his mistress. Although they located the other woman, they did not find Jesse. Angela confronted the lover and later spoke with Jesse about the situation. Witnesses said the conversation was calm and that Jesse had agreed to end the relationship. Those who knew Angela believed she loved her husband and did not want a divorce or to be alone. Afterward, Casten told the woman the affair was over, but co-workers noticed odd behavior in the days that followed. He reportedly removed his safety glasses, gloves, and work boots and left them in the break room, saying he would no longer need them. He then walked to his truck in his socks, donned a pair of tennis shoes stored in the cab, and drove home. At the house that evening, Jesse and Angela appeared to try to resolve their differences and then watched a movie whose plot chillingly mirrored their real-life troubles, a film in which a wife turned her husband in for possessing weapons. Those close to the family later said that a tense had included a threat by Jesse that if she ever betrayed him in that way, he would kill her. Shortly after, Angela went to take a shower while Casten placed a phone call. Brittany, Angela's daughter, grew suspicious and accused Jesse of speaking with the woman he had been seeing. The accusation ignited an explosive argument that quickly escalated into violence. Hours later, Angela Casten made a desperate 911 call, pleading for help. Her daughter later said she had known Jesse could be violent with her mother, but had never imagined he would actually kill her. As investigators continued questioning friends and relatives about Jesse's motives, they learned that his anger toward Angela's friend, Sharon McIntyre, stemmed from a personal grudge. About a year before the murder, Angela and Jesse had been living with Sharon. During one of their arguments, Jesse threatened to hit Angela, prompting Sharon to step in. Sharon told Angela that she was always welcome to stay, but Jesse had to leave. From that moment on, Jesse harbored deep resentment toward Sharon because she had stood up to him, something he could not tolerate. He also bore hostility toward his stepdaughter, Brandy. She later explained that she had once talked back to her mother on the phone, criticizing Angela for letting Jesse abuse her. Jesse overheard the conversation and never forgot it. According to those who knew him, Jesse rarely bothered people unless they had crossed him, but when he felt challenged, he became dangerously vengeful. Despite gathering extensive information about his violent tendencies and personal grudges, authorities still struggled to locate him. FBI agents focused their search on East Texas, the last place he had been seen, fearing he might harm more people before they caught him. However, Casten soon returned to his home region. He hitched a ride to Arkansas, then boarded a bus to Tula, Louisiana, only 28 miles from Lake Providence. Once back on familiar ground, he began seeking shelter. Jesse had several acquaintances willing to protect him, and his outlaw persona had even earned him a strange kind of admiration among some locals, a folk hero image reminiscent of figures like Bonnie and Clyde. Eventually, he found refuge in an abandoned trailer on the property of a distant relative, James Kelly. Kelly secretly brought him food and allowed him to stay there for 2 or 3 days, hiding in his backyard while the manhunt continued to close in. Jesse James Casten soon found himself in close proximity to James Kelly's daughter-in-law, Andrea, yet another woman with whom he was rumored to be having an affair. Those who knew Casten described him as remarkably charming and persuasive, someone who could easily gain the trust of others. That charm, however, only heightened his danger. People familiar with his true nature understood just how unpredictable and menacing he could be, which was why so many feared him deeply. After nearly a week hiding out on Kelly's property, Casten convinced another girlfriend to give him a ride. Once again, he vanished, this time for months, leaving behind no trace. Investigators speculated that he might still be in the Lake Providence area, concealed in the dense rural landscape. With his survival skills, he could easily take shelter in old barns, abandoned farms, or hidden cabins without being detected. Several reported sightings came in, but each one turned out to be false. Even after repeated visits, law enforcement continued to face resistance from the local community. Many believe Casten's relatives were secretly in contact with him, doing whatever they could to protect or assist him, Others in town refused to speak out of pure terror. Locals were genuinely afraid that Casten might appear at their homes in the middle of the night and kill them, a fear that wasn't unfounded, given his violent history. Special Agent Nate Song, who was leading much of the fieldwork, also took no chances. At the time, most FBI agents didn't carry high-powered rifles, but Song obtained special authorization to keep an M16 in his car. He explained that whenever he went to Lake Providence for surveillance or to monitor certain homes, he carried the weapon to ensure he wouldn't be outgunned if Casten suddenly appeared. 4 months after the murders, the FBI officially added Jesse James Casten to its 10 most wanted fugitives list. Once a suspect reached that level, tracking them became a top priority. Agents knew that each name on the list represented one of the 10 most dangerous criminals in the country. To encourage cooperation, the FBI offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to Casten's capture. Meanwhile, residents of Lake Providence lived in constant dread. 6 months after the murders, the fugitive was still at large. His name and face now circulated nationwide, featured on the FBI's most wanted list. Then, a call came from California. A tipster claimed that a man resembling Casten was working at a construction site in Orange County. The caller even mentioned that the man was wearing brand new work boots, an eerie detail, since Casten had famously discarded his own boots on the day of the murders, saying he wouldn't need them anymore. Investigators seized on the lead, distributing wanted posters to construction sites throughout the area in hopes of identifying him. But despite their efforts, the tip led nowhere. Once again, Jesse James Casten had vanished, leaving authorities empty-handed, and the town of Lake Providence haunted by the fear that he might someday return. Investigators later recalled that many of the leads they received consisted of lookalikes, some of whom were already wanted for other crimes and behaved suspiciously simply because they matched Casten's description. Despite the false leads, agents were convinced that Casten would eventually return to Lake Providence. Locals themselves believed he would come back, and authorities viewed his return as only a question of when. With no money of his own, they reasoned he would have to rely on friends or family for shelter. On September 27, roughly 6 months after Casten fled, a source reported that his father had told a close friend that Jesse's appearance had changed so much he would not be recognized. That comment suggested the elder Casten had recently seen his son, and it heightened fears in the community. Rumors circulated that Jesse maintained a list of intended victims, and many residents worried their names might be on it. In response, FBI agents reactivated old leads and established surveillance in the area. Months passed without a confirmed sighting until December 13, when Andrea Kelly, one of the women believed to have been involved with Casten and her husband Bubba, contacted Agent Song to ask about the reward on Casten's head. 5 nights after that call, the Kellys' home was destroyed in a fire that left little standing. Only the family's 4 dogs remained inside. All perished. Investigators considered the blaze suspicious and believed it might indicate Casten's presence nearby, though he was never formally charged with arson. Tensions rose further when James Kelly, who had earlier aided Casten, and his son Bubba disappeared. James had reportedly planned to tell his son about Jesse's affair with Andrea, and agents believed he had intended to confront Jesse. The next morning, the Kellys' vehicle was found on the Mississippi River levee in East Carroll Parish. One body was discovered inside and the other nearby. Forensic reports indicated that the father had been shot and his throat cut, while the son had been shot. Police suspected Casten's involvement but lacked definitive proof, prompting an intensification of the manhunt. Investigators increased pressure on Casten's parents, relatives, and acquaintances to provide information. Interviews and polygraph examinations suggested Jesse had recently been seen at his father's and possibly his mother's house. Authorities planned coordinated arrests and searches. On the morning of December 20, agents and local police executed simultaneous raids at the homes of Jesse's mother and brother, but did not find him. Undeterred, Special Agent Harry Deal ordered additional searches of locations that had already been canvassed, reasoning that with personnel and resources in place, it made sense to recheck likely hiding spots. Based on intelligence, Agent Deal suspected Jesse might be concealed at his father's residence. The elder Casten unexpectedly granted consent for a search of the property, and agents prepared to carry out the operation tactically, fully aware of the possibility of an armed confrontation. They planned the entry under the assumption that Jesse could be inside, while acknowledging that a negative result would be preferable but not surprising. Agents warned that if Casten were in the house, they would treat the operation as a live, armed confrontation and would be fully prepared. Officers entered through the kitchen, led by Special Agent Harry Deal with a Louisiana State Trooper close behind. Although it was midday, the interior was dark. Deal swept the kitchen with his flashlight and, finding no one there, announced the room was clear before moving toward a doorway that opened into a combined living and dining room area. The living room was also pitch black. Crouched in the doorway, Deal rolled his flashlight into the room. Casten suddenly emerged from behind a wall and stood only about a foot away. Deal immediately noticed the M1 carbine rifle slung across Casten's chest. The weapon was almost in his face. It was 5 days before Christmas when Deal came face to face with the multiple murderer who had been one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. Casten was armed and visibly dangerous. He initially held the rifle across his chest in a ready position. Deal trained his pistol on him with his finger on the trigger, prepared to shoot. In a tense moment, a trooper yanked on Deal's vest strap and pulled him out of immediate danger. Both agents took cover in the kitchen. Deal attempted to negotiate with Casten, but Casten threatened to shoot if law enforcement did not withdraw. Concerned that the situation could spiral into bloodshed, Deal agreed to back out of the house, hoping that a tactical withdrawal would calm Casten. By that time, a Louisiana State SWAT team had established a full perimeter around the property. From inside, Casten insisted he would only speak with a particular local official, Prosecutor Buddy Caldwell. Agents put Caldwell on the phone and then handed the call to Casten. During that exchange, Casten announced his intent to kill many people. Caldwell responded and then rushed to the scene to speak with him face to face. When Caldwell arrived, he engaged Casten in conversation. Casten, who was armed with an automatic weapon and carrying several armor-piercing rounds, claimed he had not killed James and Bubba Kelly and asked for leniency. He sought assurance that prosecutors would not pursue the death penalty and even proposed a lenient, fixed-term deal referring to a notorious plea arrangement known from other high-profile cases. Caldwell rejected the notion of bargaining away justice in exchange for a short sentence and warned that if such a deal were offered, it would mean many lives had been lost for nothing. For a moment, Casten laughed, but he then shifted tactics and requested that his father and others who had aided him not be prosecuted. Once Caldwell indicated he would not seek charges against those who had helped hide Casten, the fugitive agreed to surrender. Casten handed over his rifle and its magazines. Agents described the moment as highly tense, since even after surrendering, an armed man could potentially pull a concealed weapon. Nevertheless, the exchange was completed, and authorities took control of the scene. Agents later said that Casten could easily have opened fire from behind the door at any moment and caused mass casualties, which made the arrest exceptionally tense. Federal officers ultimately took him into custody, bringing an end to an exhausting 8-month pursuit. About 2 weeks after his capture, Casten was formally indicted on multiple charges, including first-degree murder in the death of Sharon McIntyre, first-degree murder in the death of Angela Casten, 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder of police officers, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Authorities reported that there was insufficient evidence to charge him in the murders of James and Bubba Kelly. Shortly before his trial was scheduled to begin, Casten pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of Sharon McIntyre and received a life sentence. The remaining charges were subsequently dropped. Friends and neighbors expressed relief that he would remain incarcerated, insisting that prison was where he belonged and that violence was not an acceptable response to personal problems. Those who knew him best remained convinced that he would never abandon his outlaw ways. Some suggested it would not be surprising if he or his brothers attempted an escape one day, and they feared he could become dangerous again if freed. Others felt that a death sentence might have offered an easier closure, though they recognized many would disagree. Still, Observers believed that as long as Casten remained behind bars, he would be forced to confront the lives he had destroyed, an inescapable burden they hoped would follow him for the rest of his days.